Hi there, my name's Matt. Thanks for joining me today on Critical Praxis. I thought I'd just take a couple minutes out of my day of enjoying nature. See the splendor of nature behind me right there? In all its glory. I'd like to tell you a little bit about a research project that looks at textual and spatial intervention in embodied audiencing rituals. What does all that mean? Basically means I'm looking at people talking back to movies and other performances in movie theaters. Ooh, talking over a movie, isn't that the worst thing you can ever do? And people get really, really mad if you think you can do that. Have you ever been in a movie theater where someone's like, I'm going to talk and text and don't stop me? Oh, people love to discipline each other into silence, don't they? We have the shush, the eye roll, and then when management comes down, everyone gives a big round of applause because they finally shut that jerk up. I mean, where else in this wonderful neoliberal world of ours do we go to be and pay that much money to be told to shut up? Maybe the public library, but not as much money. I get to thinking about a case out of Philadelphia, I want to say 2008. A fellow shoots another guy in the theater because he wouldn't stop talking. Apparently, the curious case of Benjamin Button was good enough to risk a 5 to 15 years for aggravated assault. So here's a fun exercise. If you doubt the fact that people get really, really mad about talking in theaters, go stand outside your local multiplex and see how many people favor your right to carry a loaded assault rifle into a darkened theater versus your right to talk and text during the movie. You may be surprised. And yet there's something, I call it tantalizingly transgressive about stepping out of your role as a silent, invisible body in the theater and delivering just that right joke. You know, the one that cracks up the whole audience, maybe gets them to laugh or applaud. People love talking back to screens. People love talking back to movies, television shows, all that stuff. We just don't want anyone else to do it, unless they're really, really funny. It's fun, but we can't have that. And of course, why we can't have that? It's because we can't hear the movie. If we're listening or watching our neighbors do their thing, we can't get lost in the splendor of the film and the universe it creates for us. We are constantly being pulled out of the universe of the text every time someone talks or moves or does anything that's out of the usual script. And then if someone says something mean about the movie, have you ever realized that you just can't see the rest of it in the same way? Like if someone says something bad about the hero, you just can't see the hero the same way anymore. But did you ever stop to think that might be a good thing, or at least not an inherently evil thing? But I know communal audiencing, an audiencing ethic where embodied performance is not only tolerated but welcome, where the thing on the stage, in this case me, isn't this big glowing god that we all defer to, but it's just one aspect of the theater experience. Get out. It never happened. It's impossible. Of course, we know that's not true. Only recently in the history of audiencing has stillness and silence become the absolute norm. As technology gets bigger, as the movies are louder and brighter and immerse us more, the embodied presence of the theater has become all but a thing of the past. But certainly throughout history, that hasn't been the norm. When you think of like Shakespeare's groundlings, the parterre audiences of pre-revolutionary France, they were musical theater mostly. The peanut gallery of vaudeville. These were loud, obnoxious, boisterous, grotesque, carnivalesque in a Buckinian sense. They were a part of the theater experience every bit as what was going on the stage. Throwing fruit at the performers, booing, choreographed spitting and sneezing. There's even one fella from France that actually protested an aborted performance by taking a poop on the floor. Obnoxious, yes. But what's really going on here is we see people struggling over a theater space. People who insist that their bodies matter, that they have room to move, and that they're not deferring to whatever's going on the stage. Quite a bit different from the way we audience these days. Let me just take apart my admittedly soggy notes here. The rest of this may get messy if my notes have bled together all the way. There we go, that was awkward. Anyway, so today we see traces of these kind of behaviors at like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, my personal favorite, The Room, and my favorite place to be in the entire world, B-Fest, the 24-hour bad movie festival at Northwestern University, last weekend of every January. We also have the rise of the Mystery Science Theater 3000 inspired movie riffing rituals, talking back to cheesy movies in ways that are funny, critical. These are things that are getting more popular throughout the years here, and to the point where you can see a lot of this stuff going on in everyday theaters. True, it's sanctioned, it's ephemeral, and that it's not really changing the way we do the everyday theater thing. And when you get into things like Rocky Horror that have been around so long, they're so tightly scripted that really you end up just kind of trading one script for the other. But what's really cool to me here is we see people still using embodied performance and exercising their voice in creative ways to change how we understand the theater space, and also to change how we understand the texts that are being shown there in these films. So in my research, I asked, what if we take the best things about like the Rocky Horror experience, the Mystery Science Theater 3000 version of riffing, Shakespeare's Groundlings, and all that cool stuff, and try to harness their performative possibilities and embrace talking back to mediated text, whether in a theater or else, or in your own home, and sharing it through the internet, or cool things like that. What if we take those audiencing ethics, combine them, and really embrace them as a method of critical interpretive practice? What does that mean in other ways? To throw out some of that jargon, what if in addition to trying to make people laugh with our riffing and our joking and our running around and throwing things in the air in theaters, what if we talk back to the screen, knowing full well and embracing the fact that we are explicitly entering into struggle over what that text should mean and how it should be read? Now, if you're following the Critical Praxis project, I probably don't need to remind you that pop culture texts are a big deal, and they are a lot of what constitutes us as various peoples in this country, and elsewhere, I'm sure, too. They are complex, they're ideologically loaded, they call upon us to accept particular articulations of reality. They call on us to identify with their heroes, to reject their villains, and to translate their lessons learned in those films kind of into everyday, to use a Burkean term, equipment for a living. Like when you watch Star Wars, obviously you're called upon, you want to be like Luke Skywalker. You don't want to be like, Porkins, who gets blown up, after 2 minutes of film time. So you say, what is it about this Luke Skywalker guy that makes him a good character? And then what if I try to live like that? Now, it's not quite that simple. We're maybe not that malleable, but it's true that these texts do call on us to accept certain attitudes and behave in certain ways, and it calls on us to take those behaviors that we see on the screen and translate them into everyday life. Also, if you're following the Critical Praxis project, I probably don't need to remind you that these ideologies, that I'm talking about can be pretty gross. These articulations are overwhelmingly neoliberal, bourgeoisie, white, heteronormative, Judeo-Christian, masculine positionalities. These are most favored. Now, how this works is it's constructed through symbolism, combinations of iconography, dialogue. As audiences, we don't just ingest them wholesale, but we piece them together, these symbols, through the lens of our own realities, and we make sense of them. If you follow the work of Stuart Hall, Celeste Condit, if you are watching a text that is, that's my big list, neoliberal, bourgeoisie, white, heteronormative, Judeo-Christian, and masculine, and you happen to be neoliberal, bourgeoisie, white, heteronormative, Judeo-Christian, and masculine, you have easy access to the reification of your worldview. Pretty much every show you see on any of the big corporate networks is going to cater to your vision of reality. If you are not those things, and I imagine a lot of us in the audience tonight aren't, maybe not so. You have your worldview, you're probably used to having your worldview challenged when you turn on the TV or watch the news or see a Hollywood movie. But the good news, as I talked a little bit about, is that these ideological formations are encoded by text producers, but as text readers, we decode them. And I believe we have, there's some debate over how much agency we have in the decoding process, but I argue that if we are symbolically equipped, if our worldview is critical in certain ways, this allows us to decode in a way that deconstructs some of those mythologies, some of those poisonous discourses in mainstream mediated texts. And if we can harness those critical discursive skills, perhaps we can use embodied performance, talk back to screens as tactical rhetoric, to enter into struggle over the meaning of some of these texts that really need to have someone talking back to them. Because we are always gathering threads, not only from these texts, but from all strands of life. In other texts we've seen daily activities, things like that. If we really harness those things and are cognizant of what we're doing, I think we can talk back to pop culture in a way that becomes explicitly political and can have some material implications in the world. Give my, come on, notes don't fail me now. Yay! All right. So for me, what makes this, these text reading practices, they go on all the time. But for me, what makes them really cool about the movie riffing and the audiencing rituals is that it takes that sense-making process that goes on in our heads all the time, and it brings it out into the open where we can not only study it, but we can share it. We can talk to others in a way that changes, or at least calls on them to challenge the way they view the world. Tactical riffing, it can take on some of those symbols in smart ways that, if they're unchecked, tend to crystallize and kind of become, what Roland Barthes would call mythologies, taken for granted for truths. If those symbols are unchecked, they can crystallize, but if we don't allow them to crystallize by challenging the way they're formed symbolically, it's possible we can make this into critical praxis. And if we're politically coherent enough, we can use our tactical rhetoric in ways that become accumulative. They can contribute to new ways of understanding that don't just interact with a particular text, but with any text. We're always learning when we're talking back to strings, and we tend not to forget those things. When it becomes political, when it becomes purposeful and persuasive, this is when talking back to the screen taps into some of those awesome traditions like Umberto Eco's semiological guerrilla warfare, the tradition of denouement, which Debord would define as the art of of using art for partisan political purposes. When we're talking amongst ourselves, and sharing those discourses and really being open to different ways that people are talking, then it tends to become heuristic. We can take the lessons learned from a particular text, a particular audiencing experience, and use them elsewhere. The more voices, the more possibility for dialogic interactions and new understanding. So if you have people from different ideologies talking back to the same text, then we get all kinds of new alchemic possibilities. So that's about all I have for you today. My notes are thoroughly soaked. But I will just leave you with this. The next time you're in a movie theater and you're tempted to shush the person next to you, maybe just wait just a sec, just 1 sec. And don't forget to listen to what they're saying too before you try to silence them, because they just might be saying something you might want to hear. See you next time.